Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm back in my 2002 Mercedes SL55 AMG. I bought this car back in September last year from a viewer, along with a Bentley Continental GT. Easily the two best cars, or nicest cars I've ever bought. The Bentley had only done 18,000 miles when I bought it, and this Mercedes SL had only done 16,000 miles when I bought it. They just aren't the sort of cars you see on a daily basis, unless of course you live in Wilmslow or Chigwell. And I've got to say, I absolutely love it. So much so it's turned me into Gary Barlow, hasn't it? It's absolutely fantastic. Now before we get onto the proper review, if you fancy winning something like this, the guys over at BOTB have got 2 cars to give away every single week, 52 weeks of the year. They've got some unbelievable cars that they're giving away at the moment, so click the link below in the description and you can have a look for yourself at some of the tasty cars they've got there. They do a dream car competition as well as a midweek competition. Now every single dream car competition comes with £50,000 in cash, as well as the car. So you don't have to worry about how you're going to fill it up or how you're going to service it because, like I say, they give away £50,000. So rather than wasting the evening looking on Auto Trader at cars that you've got no intention of buying, click the link below in the description and you can have a look at what BOTB have got for offer. You only have to be 17 years or older to enter, and the tickets start at as little as £1.50. And as if that wasn't enough, they'll also help out with the first year insurance and servicing, and all their cars are brand new. To date, they've given away over £35 million worth of cars to over 540 lucky winners. So check out BOTB's website by clicking the link below in the description, and you could find yourself behind the wheel of an AMG Mercedes or whatever you fancy. There really is something for everybody. Anyway, back to today's car. So the 2002 Mercedes SL55 AMG has been around since 2002 and ran all the way until 2007, when it was replaced with the SL63 AMG. When this car was first released 19 years ago, I mean, can you imagine this car's 19 years old? It still looks fresh in my opinion. Anyway, when it was released, it cost £90,000. I mean, £90,000 19 years ago. That's the equivalent of £140,000 today. Just to put that into some sort of context, my first house cost me £118,000. That wasn't all that long ago. Anyway, the interesting thing is, you can pick up these SL55s from as little as £10,000. Although that will get you a scruffy high mileage example, which isn't something that I'd recommend. I would always advise that you steer clear of the cheapest examples out there because they're probably just basket cases that will cost you a fortune in the long run. So it's far better to spend £5,000 or £8,000 more and get yourself a decent one. When I bought this one, it was in excellent condition and I've still spent thousands and thousands of pounds on it, bringing it up to scratch. I'll go over those bills with you in a little while. The issue with this particular car was, in the last 5 years, it had only covered 150 miles. And that doesn't do cars any good, they like to be ran. So it did have quite a few faults, all of which have now been ironed out, and it is superb. So under the long and very pretty bonnet is a 5.4 litre supercharged V8. The engine produces 470 horsepower, which is 170 horsepower more than you get from an SL500. Thinking about it, it's an SL500 plus a Ford Focus ST170. And 470 horsepower in a rear-wheel drive car like this is about 100 horsepower too many, because all that happens is you stamp on the accelerator and the rear wheels just spin. It's quite theatrical though. So we'll do the old bypass test, shall we? So I'm approaching the bypass now. It's a bit wet, but I'm on new tyres, so whoa! Alright, I've bottled that slightly. That's one way to get your heart racing, isn't it? Let me try that again, hang on. Oh dear. That's just silly. What an awesome car. The engine itself is put together by hand in the AMG factory in Germany, which gives me confidence, the fact that it's hand built in Germany. If it was hand built in England, all that means is there's a quarter width socket in cylinder 3, or the crust of a bacon butty. But no, hand built in Germany gives me all the confidence in the world. Anyway, all that power has transformed the SL. It's gone from a Saint-Tropez cruiser to a tire-eating menace. Oh, that's so addictive. It's just so intoxicating. It produces nearly 500 pound-feet of torque, and it sounds like thunder. It's epic. The great thing about the SL is when you don't want to be a hooligan, you can just sit back and cruise. Cruise control's set. That's it, nice and chilled out. It is the perfect Grand Tourer. I also love the styling of this car. Now, I'm a big fan of the standard SL, but the SL55 just looks way better. I love the quad exhausts. I love the different tail lights. When the convertible top's in place, it's quite well insulated, so you can't hear an awful lot of road noise or wind noise. But when it's down, all you hear is that V8 rumble. You stamp on the accelerator and it makes the noise of a T-Rex that's been kicked in the nuts. I really wish the weather was better today, because I'd be driving with the roof down. But it isn't. It's a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, this car, because unless you're really into your cars, you'd never have any idea that this is a 202 mile an hour Autobahn Stormer. I love the colour combination too. Brilliant silver with this berry interior. It just suits the car to a T. I know in a previous video where I featured this car, somebody commented and suggested it looked like something Joan Collins would drive. And I have to admit, it's a bit Beverly Hills, isn't it? Every time I would watch MTV Cribs as a kid, the moment they got to the garage, there was always an SL55 in there. Always. It was just the car of choice for anybody with money in the early noughties. Speaking of celebrities, famous owners of the SL55 include Tom Jones, who's suave and sophisticated, Steve Jobs, who's a visionary and a genius, Jeremy Clarkson, who I like to think knows a thing or two about what makes a car good, and who else? Dale Winton. Moving on. The interior is a very special place to be. It's helped the fact that this has only done 17,000 miles and everything you touch is like new. But still, the actual design is fairly timeless. And I love the attention to detail. All the finely stitched leather. All the leather actually is soft to touch and supple. It's gorgeous, it really is. This really does feel like a time warp piece. I feel guilty taking it out in the wet, to be honest. Because this was a £90,000 car, it's obviously got some nice optional extras. For example, it's got heated and cooled seats, keyless entry, keyless go. Some of the gadgets are showing their age a little bit though. For example, it's got a mobile telephone, which allows you to have a verbal conversation with somebody else who's got a similar contraption. There's a device here which turns your compact discs into sound. It also has a satellite navigation system which would only impress Raymond Baxter. I love how you start it. It makes you feel like a fighter pilot. You jump in it with the keys in your pocket and you just put your thumb on the engine start button on the gear shifter. Makes you feel like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Speaking of which, I love how you fold down the electric roof. It's behind this panel here. Very maverick. All it's missing really is a night panel button like you'd get on an old Saab. It only takes 16 seconds to open or close. It's just a brilliant piece of engineering. It's like watching ballet. I think you've probably gathered this by now, but the performance is impressive. It uses a 5-speed automatic gearbox. All SL55s used a 5-speed, which I prefer over the 7G, the 7-speed box, which was a later edition. You can also knock it into manual mode and change the gears using these buttons behind the steering wheel, but to measure the speed of those gear changes, you really need a calendar. So I'd rather just keep it in drive and let it do its thing. Anyone who's driven an old smart car will know exactly what I'm talking about. It handles very well. It's a blast to drive. It's incredibly tail happy, so you do have to watch out. I mean, it's not as nimble or as agile as a 911, but unless you're taking it on a track or something, does it really matter? I would say not, personally. For me, a car doesn't have to be technically brilliant to be brilliant. One slight issue is how easy the rear wheels will spin. I say issue, it's not really an issue for me because I love the childishness of it. I imagine it might be an issue if you're the chair of Hanforth Parish Council. No, Jackie! Stop spinning the wheels! You just get the impression this car, you could have it sideways on literally every single road, which you do have to be careful of. The ride quality of the SL is sublime. Now, that's thanks to its clever ABC hydraulic suspension setup, which I know can cause headache, heartache, and then divorce, but when it's working, it's lovely. The suspension is fully adjustable, which means you can raise or lower the height, a bit like a Range Rover. But not unlike a Range Rover, it can be expensive to repair. It just always seems to give you the best setup. When you just want to go for a chilled out drive, it's supremely comfortable. But then the moment you're late for a meeting, say, it goes all firm and sporty. I'm currently being tailgated by a little Fiesta who I think wants to see the contents of my boot. So, just have to remind him what we're in for a second. So long, sucker. Running costs are obviously higher than a Honda Jazz, I think that's a given, but not horrendously so. Fuel, you'll do 15 or 16 miles per gallon around town, but you'll do 27, 28 miles per gallon on a motorway run, which isn't bad at all, is it? Another thing that's quite reasonable is the insurance cost. Given the age of this thing, it now qualifies for classic insurance, so that won't cost you an arm or a leg. Standard servicing costs aren't prohibitive either. They're not that much more expensive than any other SL. And the road tax is cheap. Because this is a pre-2006, it's only £330 a year, which compared to lots of other countries is a bargain. Regarding servicing, I would find a good Mercedes specialist and stick with them because they can be quite temperamental. That leads me on to probably the only negative thing I can tell you about the SL55, and that's the repair bills. Nothing is cheap to repair on this car. I bought this car when it was 18 years old at the time, and it had only done 16,000 miles. For the last 5 years, it had only done 150 miles in total. So there were quite a few issues that needed addressing. In fact, now's probably a good time to go through the bills, isn't it? Let me just find somewhere to park. So as soon as I bought the car, I took it straight to SPR, who are an independent Mercedes specialist in Stockport, who I always use. I left it with them for basically whatever it needed. So it had a full engine service, spark plugs, filters, the whole lot. It had a gearbox service, basically because it was just 18-year-old fluid. It had an ABC service, so they changed the fluid in the filter in the hydraulic system, and it also had a brake fluid change. The air conditioning wasn't working, so it had an aircon regas. The batteries and the keys weren't working. The engine light was on, which turned out to be an O2 sensor, and also the central locking wasn't working, and I had a battery light on. So, like I say, quite a few issues. But oh, I forgot how expensive that was. That was quite a dear bill, and that wasn't all of it. So, the full service, 2 new batteries, because this has 2 batteries, one small one there to start the engine, and one in the boot there to power up all of James Burke's accessories. So the main battery was £115, the rear battery was £170. Unfortunately though, even after replacing both batteries, it didn't knock out the battery warning light, so it needed a battery control unit, which cost £522 plus VAT. So my total bill was £2,016.29. That wasn't all. When I picked it up, the central locking was working because I think they cleaned the contacts in the central locking control module or whatever, and it was working for a short period of time. But then within 3 days it had failed again. So I took it back to SPR and had a new central locking control unit, which, let me find the bill for that. It has got reams and reams of history, this car. It's got all the old tax discs, all the old MOTs. I can't find the receipt for the central locking control unit, but it was, I think it was about 800 and something pounds plus fitting. So that cost me another £1,000. Then I took it for its MOT, which it obviously passed, so that was another £40. So we're up to about £3,000 now, give or take. And the next job was the alloy wheels. Now, I'm not a huge fan of these multi-spoke wheels that are found on this SL, but they are unique to the SL55. I just think they're a little bit hectic and a little bit too busy, but they're original, so I thought I would keep them. So I took it to Prestige Wheels in Stockport, who refurbished them. So they dipped them, stripped them, and then powder coated them, and they are like new now. That cost me £288. I then paid £76.80 with Mercedes Stockport for 4 brand new wheel centres, because I didn't want to go on eBay and get some Jekylls. Also, while they had the tyres off, there was nothing really wrong with the tyres. They'd passed an MOT with no advices, but they were like 10 or 12 years old, so I thought I'll treat it to a set of Pirelli P0s. So, just 2 days ago, I spent £716.40 on 4 brand new Pirelli P0 tyres. So that takes my total to about £4,000. I know £4,000 is a hell of a lot of money, but this car deserved it. I couldn't have neglected it, could I? I had to do all those jobs properly. So, in my mind, I think it was worth every penny. And that's one thing I've learned about these SLs. No matter what the problem is, it will set you back about £1,000. Now, that figure will be too much to stomach for most, and it is to me, to be fair, for a car that I never use. But, well, you can't have it always, can you? They're cheap to buy and offer outstanding performance. So the only real downside is expensive repairs. I've picked possibly the worst day to go out filming with a Mercedes SL, haven't I? Something that you really must watch for with this era of Mercedes SL are the electronics. They are what the Germans would describe as Scheisse. They're uncharacteristically German. They really are the car's weak link. It's all just unnecessarily complicated. In addition to the dodgy electrics, the ABC system can also fail, and that can be quite an expensive fix. Also, there's some sort of design flaw which lets water into the boot, and water and electrics don't mix well. So if you're thinking of buying a Mercedes SL in general, or a 55 in particular, I would advise that you keep a few grand back for contingencies. In fact, you know how I always recommend that you keep a couple of grand back for a rainy day if you're buying a Range Rover? I would advise that you double that for SLs, especially the 55. When everything's working as it should, it's a brilliant car. It's pure theatre, it's fun and cheeky. It's just a pleasure to live with. I also love the fact that it's properly usable. There are loads of storage compartments, the boot's a very good size, just really easy to live with. I know that everyone says that the Porsche 911 is the most usable daily sports car, but I would have to argue with that. Yes, I know that on a track the 911 is a far superior car in terms of handling and dynamics, but in the real world, on real roads, I would argue that the SL's better. It's fun when you want it to be, and serious when you don't. If you have a look on Auto Trader, you can pick them up from anywhere between £10,000 and £12,000, but I would advise that you spend between 16 and 18 and get yourself a half decent one. You want to look for one with extensive service records that hasn't been abused. I think originality is key. I genuinely haven't got a clue what this one's worth because I've never seen one on the market with such low miles. I mean, it doesn't matter anyway because it's not for sale. This is a car that I will keep forever. I love it. So thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you. So yeah, cheers guys. I'll see you next time.